Hopefully that one worked. Right, well, I am delighted to be joined at Sohome Horror Pride by director of our opening night film, The Piper. Please, everybody, welcome Erlingur Thoroddsen. Nice to see you, Erlingur. How are you?
Hi, thank you, Mitch. I'm very good. Happy to be here. Thank you so much for premiering the Piper to the UK audience.
It's a delight to have it. And I mean, how would you? So if this is maybe because what we'll do, we'll kind of do this in two parts where we'll dig into spoilers towards the end. If people haven't yet seen the film, so the film will be available over the weekend. How would you? What's kind of the selling point? What's the elevator pitch for the film? Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the elevator pitch is, um, it's kind of a modern retelling of the story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, but kind of set in a world where the fairy tale, exists, and it kind of asks the question, what if the melody that the Pied Piper of Hamelin used to lead all the children away, what if that melody actually existed? And, what if people kind of unearth it and start playing it today? And kind of in the beginning when I was starting to write it, and I kind of, I always had a fascination with the fairy tale. I kind of had this idea in my mind, like, okay, if he plays it on the flute, he leads the children away, what can happen if, a whole symphony orchestra plays the same melody? So that's kind of like, I thought that was kind of an exciting concept to think about. And I wanted to do something that felt like a dark fairy tale, like a horror dark fairy tale. So a lot of those elements kind of, came together, and out came the Piper.
So did the original text, the fairy tale, come first, or was it the concept of like a cursed media piece? Because there's a lot of
It,
films that kind of ape that cursed media, whether it's a film or a piece of
right.
music.
Yeah, for me it was the fairy tale that came first. It was basically like I was in Germany. I was in Berlin in 2016 rather than maybe it was 2017. And it was kind of around the time, yeah, 2017. It was like when Rift was kind of starting to play festivals and stuff.
Mhm.
And for some reason, I don't even remember why, but like when I was in Germany, the fairy tale kind of came up, like the Pied Piper of Hamelin just kind of came up, and I was familiar with it from since I was a kid, but rereading it then as an adult, it was like, oh, there's something really sinister about this story. It's pretty creepy, and that's when I was like, oh, I haven't really seen a film version of this. I mean, there have been film versions, but nothing that's kind of stood out to me at least. So that's when I kind of started toying with the idea, like, okay, what would a kind of a modern day version of this look like? And it started from there. But the haunted media or the cursed media thing for me, like The Ring was always a big kind of inspiration, a big kind of part of I watched that film a bunch kind of as I was starting to write the Piper, and yeah, there's a lot of cool films that kind of take that concept and run with it.
Was the want to always make it contemporary and set in modern times?
Yeah, yeah, it was always that in kind of today.
Because I
Yeah,
think there is like a lot of inspiration. I think whether it's kind of just the visual language you use or the way that the narrative builds to quite like a bonkers conclusion as well that we'll get to in a minute. Is very evocative of like the early noughties, the late 90s films like Wishmaster.
right.
Was that an intentional reference point?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I always kind of wanted, in my mind, it always took place in modern day, but like, there's really not a lot of kind of modern. I mean, people they drive, kind of new-ish cars, but I actually don't think anybody uses a cell. Well, maybe in like one scene there's a cell phone, but I like the kind of making things feel as timeless as they possibly can.
Mhm.
And apart from The Ring, like some of the other big inspirations that I had, were the Hellraiser movies, and I'm a big, I've always been a big, Dario Argento fan. So kind of the visual, the visual language of stuff like Suspiria, which is also kind of his version of a dark fairy tale. So those were kind of the images that I had in my mind when I was writing. So definitely, it like it should kind of hopefully feel like a film that you might have watched in the 80s or in the 90s. Something that you kind of randomly picked from from Blockbuster or whatever, the video store, like
Yeah.
in a VHS box. So yeah, that's kind of that, hopefully that's the vibe.
Was there ever a want to maybe, because with nostalgism, like especially now moving kind of past the 80s into the 90s, was there ever a want to actually like do it as a period piece so you didn't have the trappings of cell phones or the internet?
I don't think, I mean, for me personally, no, not really, not for this one. And I don't think we ever even had that conversation. I think immediately, even though this film was, a much bigger budget than I had worked with before, it was still a fairly low budget film.
Okay.
And anytime you mention period to a producer, it's like, no, no, no. Like, so
Yeah.
I don't, yeah. So I don't think that ever even came up. But then, and I feel like kind of using, the modern stuff as sparingly as I could, kind of works for this. I mean, also like setting anything in kind of the world of classical music kind of lends it that kind of a little bit of a throwback, timeless feeling as well. But no, I don't think we ever kind of thought of making it an actual period piece.
That's interesting. We'll maybe come back to that, but you've touched on Hellraiser as an inspiration point. You're talking about the intrinsic importance of music. This film is entirely about it.
Yeah.
Maybe let's move on to talk about some of the real incredible talent that you've got within this film, yourself included, of course. You say that this is a lower budget feature. Would you still say it is a step up for you in terms of scale and scope as a director?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, before this film, I'd made Rift, which, cost like, nothing basically. That was made, with my friends and my family, and we shot it, at a, family friends cottage in the middle of nowhere for 15 days. Like that film literally cost nothing. And so, yeah, this budget, I mean, it's not like a super low budget, but it's like, it's not, by Hollywood standards, a high budget film. So for sure, it was like a huge step up for me. Most of, in terms of the money, yeah. But I think mostly for me, it was the size of the crew. I had come from Rift, which had like a 10-person crew, and all of a sudden I was with 50, 60, 70 people per day, which was amazing. But it's also like that's an adjustment that nobody can really teach you. You just kind of have to adjust to it,
Yeah.
kind of on the fly. Yeah.
Suddenly you've got 10 times more people coming to you for answers that
Yeah,
previously
exactly.
you would just be like, well, I'm just going to do this myself, I'm presuming.
A lot more questions. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And and it's nice that you don't have to do everything by yourself. But it's also like when you're coming from that world, when you're coming from like the kind of super, super indie world where, you get used to just, everything kind of starts and ends with you. It can be a little hard to kind of let go of some of those things. But I feel like I learned to let go of some of that control in a good way.
So was there ever designs for this to maybe be handled as a script with a lower budget and a smaller cast and crew? I think you said you started writing it around like 2016.
Yeah. I actually like I when I was writing it, I was never kind of too kind of conscious of any budget number. Like I knew I was writing it, the scale was already bigger than something like Rift. So I knew like of course it was going to be a bigger budget, but I didn't have like any number in mind or anything. And when we like, when I finished the script and the people that I work with, when we started sending the script around to producers and companies, it really kind of just, there's a lot of people interested, but it kind of, the reason why I ended up going with Millennium was, number one, they were super passionate about the project, but also they have their whole kind of situation, and they have their own huge studio in Sofia in Bulgaria,
Mhm.
where they shoot most of their films, and they are able to keep costs down by doing that. So like they told me, like any budget number we tell you, like it's going to look twice as big because of the way we kind of do things. So that was one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to go with them, because I they were passionate about it, but also they had the means to kind of realize the vision that I had in mind.
Yeah. And how much, so once Millennium came on board, how much did they have creative control? Decided or kind of steered you towards either casting decisions or visual elements that you're putting in the film?
Yeah, I mean it was very collaborative. Like me and my my kind of main producer, we really we kind of worked like a team. Like we basically kind of went through what always happens, like even whether it's like the indie level or a big budget level, like you have a script, you go and make it, and all of a sudden a lot of realities start to happen, like, oh, we only have this person for this many days, and we only have this location for that many days. So you always have to kind of adjust the script to kind of fit into the real world, unless maybe you have $200 million, then you can do whatever you want, but
Mhm.
we didn't have that. So kind of the changes that we started making were more just to kind of, logical, like logistical changes. So yeah, they were involved, but always in a, not in a pushy way, but more in a kind of, we know kind of what we can make happen here in Sofia, so we can kind of help you adjust things to make sure you get what you want.
So so Bulgaria, I'm presuming, was the third country that you've shot a film in now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Presumably
true.
Iceland, America, and then Bulgaria, then being a
And Bulgaria, yeah,
completely
exactly.
new thing. Was it mainly Bulgarian crew? I know there's a lot of UK cast in it.
Yes. So yeah, it was mainly like a UK Ireland cast.
Mhm.
And yeah, the majority of the crew was from Bulgaria. We had an Irish DP, and an Italian production designer who lives in Bulgaria. But yeah, I think a British editor, Christopher Young, of course, the composer. He's American,
Mhm.
but I think pretty much everybody else in the crew, aside from the producers, were Bulgarian, and they're amazing. I mean, they're like, I mean, they've made so many movies by now. Like all Disney shoots there. Like, Fox is a part of Disney now, but like Fox was shooting
Mhm.
at the same time as we were. All these mega big projects were happening kind of around us at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, Barbarian was shooting at the same time.
Really?
Yeah, which was a
So it
small movie,
wasn't
but like, but
Detroit.
that was yeah, no, it wasn't Detroit. It was Sofia,
Yeah.
Bulgaria. Yeah, I think they did like 1 or 2 days in Detroit just to get like the kind of
Sure. Yeah.
the widest shots.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything else was in Sofia.
Mhm. And correct me, where's the film set canonically?
Yeah, so good question. We never really like
Hmm.
it's not really set in any specific city.
Mhm.
Basically we were going for kind of an East Coast vibe, so kind of New York-ish, Boston-ish, something kind of East Coast America, but it's never specific.
Was that like a Stephen King influence?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I grew up reading Stephen King, so like for me, like kind of yeah, Americana is like whatever I read in those books.
Mhm.
So that's just kind of infused in my mind.
Yeah. It's like that New England East Coast kind of thing.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
So you've mentioned him. You've also mentioned Hellraiser. Let's talk about Chris Young. And
Yes.
like what's the story there? Let's start there. How did you get Chris in? Because that to me is a big scoop. Like a
Oh
really
yeah. I
big
mean,
scoop for the film.
it was incredible, and it was such a like it was really one of those things where, so when we started kind of, prepping it for production, I had made, just for myself, and also, I gave to the producers, I gave them kind of a playlist of pieces of music that I kind of felt was the vibe. And there was like a couple of Hellraiser pieces in there. There was a lot of Prokofiev in there, Ravel, like a mix of like movie music and also just kind of classical music. And so Christopher Young was always like my kind of dream get. But I never really kind of thought it was realistic to get him. But as we were kind of like talking about potential composers, I was like, hey, why can we like try Christopher Young? And as it turned out, Millennium had just hired him to do another film that they were shooting that had like just finished shooting around, a few months before we started shooting, a film called The Offering. So they were already kind of familiar with him, and they were in dialogue with him at the time. And one of the producers was like, hey, maybe I'll just, see if he wants to read the script. So they sent him the script. And like, I don't know, 3 days later, it was like, Christopher is like super excited about it. He loves the script and wants to meet with you. And that's kind of how it happened. And like, he really connected to the story and the script. And of course, like he says himself, it's any composer's dream to get to work on a, not just a film where like, the piece of music kind of unleashes hell, but also where the music is such an integral part of the story. Like the whole movie is all centered around the music.
Character. It absolutely.
Yeah.
Like it before you see the titular Piper kind of corporeally, it is an extension of that character, and it has to kind of translate a lot of the sinister elements of the film through it.
Exactly.
Or the less sinister elements as well, of course. Like the fable itself is all about corrupting the youth or taxing the youth in that way. And so how much input did you have with Chris on what that piece of music would be, outside of just presumably giving kind of like reference points?
Yeah, so I gave Chris basically the same references that I had given the producers, it was literally just like my playlist as I was writing the script. It was like the music I got into the mood, for writing. So I sent him that, and we had many conversations even before he started writing anything. We just had conversations about the vibe, and how he was asking me like, how do you imagine the all these kinds of just kind of vibey questions. And the kind of one thing that I felt was very important about the main melody was that it needed to it needed to be catchy, but it also needed to be something that a child could hum, that would kind of get stuck in their brain, but also had like a sinister undertone. And those are like three very specific things that they're not like, none of those things is easy to get on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then to put them all together was like, and I could see him being like, okay, let me try. And he came up with like a bunch of variations, and they were all amazing. I have all of them, and they were all amazing, 1-minute melodies, but they never like, they just didn't, for some reason, they kind of didn't fit. And he tells his story much better than I do. But basically, like, because I was already in Bulgaria at this time, and we needed to have that melody. Basically, we needed the whole concerto written before we started shooting, because we had an actual orchestra that needed to play it. So there was a little bit of a ticking clock. It wasn't just like, we film and then he can start working kind of peacefully afterwards. This was like, he had to be involved in the production. So he had sent us all these melodies, and they were awesome, but they kind of weren't quite what we needed. So we called him like, hey, can you meet us on a Zoom tomorrow? And because of the time difference, it was like 8 a.m. In LA, and late evening for us. So he basically said, the way he tells the story, like, he didn't sleep at all that night, and he came up with like 5 or 6 new pieces that he just kind of, in a kind of a panic. It was just like, okay, let me try this, let me try this, let me try that. And he had a feeling about one of them himself. And then he's at the piano, we're all on a Zoom, and he starts playing the melodies. And like the first one is like, okay, it's good, but like, okay, let's hear the next one. And he plays that. It's like, okay, this is nice, okay. And then the third one, and he starts playing, and we all, like all the people on the Zoom, we just like froze. And it was like immediately, just like 3 seconds into it, I knew like this is the one, and we all agreed. And yeah, so that's how it happened. That's how we found it.
And how did he actually record the score? Was it like synthesized? Did you have a full orchestra at your disposal?
Yeah, we had almost 100 people orchestra, which is crazy. So
Crazy.
he recorded in Bulgaria, in Sofia, with the orchestra you see in the film is like a small part of that whole orchestra. So we had like, I think 35 people on stage for the film. But then we used the same players and the rest of the orchestra for the recording the full score. So basically like the whole concerto and big chunks of the score are recorded with them. And then there's like some synthesizers for the kind of the underscore as well. We wanted a little bit of a different feel for the underscore versus the main concerto, but that they also felt like a piece.
Yeah. And have you and Christopher actually watched the film in an auditorium at all yet? Have you been able to hear it on like a full sound system?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen it a bunch of times. And we had a premiere in Los Angeles last October, and then we had the Icelandic premiere in January or February this year. And both of those times it got played in a pretty amazing soundstage. But also like when we mixed the film, I went back to Sofia because they have a beautiful mixing theater with like a huge screen and like the most amazing sound you can imagine. So that's where we did the final mix of the film. So I've been able to see it multiple times with the kind of
Amazing.
all the bells and whistles.
Yeah, that's
which is very nice. It's very different to experience it that way than on your computer. But anything that works for people, I'm happy
And
that they just see it.
Does Mel have her own theme within the film?
Yeah, there's like a theme. Well, there's like a theme, kind of a mother and daughter theme. Kind of, I get, the mother and daughter theme was what we called it. Yeah.
So moving on from Chris, let's talk about Julian.
Yes.
Who unfortunately is no longer with us. And I believe this is one of kind of certainly in terms of release schedule, one of the last films. I'm not sure kind of on the timescale. When did you film this? Was it 22?
2021 we filmed.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Julian, it was another, he's always been, a favorite of mine. I always like, he's one of those people, like when he pops up in a movie, I just like, oh, this is gonna be fun. Like because he always kind of gives it his all. He's such a great presence in anything, and he's such a specific presence. So he was, one of my top choices for the Gustafsson character. And it was basically the same thing. Like I kind of suggested it to the casting director, like, hey, can we try Julian? And we sent him the script, and he liked the script, and we had a meeting. And Julian, he was very much a man of the world. Like he loved music, he loved traveling, he loved great food, and so, which is stuff that I love as well. So we had a lot in common. Our first conversation was we hit it off really well at the beginning, and he connected with the script, and I think he enjoyed taking the part of like the kind of a little bit evil conductor. I think that was a fun role for him. So yeah, he basically, like, on that meeting, he said, like, he told me, like, he's had a long career, and at that point in his career, he wanted to do things more just for the experience and for the fun.
Yeah.
And as he said himself, like he just wants to have adventures with great people. And he told me like I would love to, have this adventure with you. So yeah, he came to Bulgaria
That's
a few
amazing.
weeks later, and we made the film.
Because he's quite a storyteller.
Oh
I've
yeah,
I've
yeah,
seen him at a couple of Q&As, and he is one that will that the mic is handed to him, or presumably within like
yeah.
a luncheon setting, the stage is given to him, and he will regale any story from any time in the past. It's impressive. Which
He's
when you have a character that is so um stage ready and charismatic, it's 100%
yeah.
what you need.
Exactly. And he's worked with everybody. Like he's worked with like the most amazing directors, the most amazing actors. Like you could name almost like any person and he has a story about them, which is really fun. For me, like, asking about Argento or Cronenberg or Fincher, like he's worked with all of them.
And now Thoroddsen as well. Like you're
And
up.
now, yeah, exactly,
There
exactly.
we go. You're like that's like this whole 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Yeah,
You're basically there with Lynch and Argento now.
right. Maybe not quite yet, but
So from the kind of the shoot aspect, we spoke about the raised scope of the film. What was the most challenging side of the film to shoot?
I mean, I think just, logistically and everything, the whole kind of climax with the orchestra was
Mhm.
very, very challenging because there was a lot of, there's a lot of people on that stage, the music, we were kind of getting the music literally like hour by hour as we were shooting because Christopher was just like, he had no time to write and then finish, it was kind of chaotic, but, thankfully it turned out fine. But yeah, I mean that climax because not only do you have the orchestra, but there's a lot of kind of not just like CGI effects, but there's like a lot of practical effects. We have like that
All the snow
door that
work was
appears. This,
practical, wasn't it, as well? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. The snow, having snow inside it looks amazing, but it's a nightmare to get right. And we didn't have a lot of days to shoot this. I mean, for me it was when it was like 26 days that we had to shoot,
Mhm.
which was for me by far a lot more than I had worked with before. But on an unwieldy project like
It's
this,
not much.
it's not much, and we felt it. So we were always kind of racing against the clock.
Mhm.
But it was also like during COVID, and we had 500 extras in the theater, and to test everybody and kind of make sure everything was good. Yeah, it was very intense days, very very intense days.
Mhm. I can imagine. I'm going to give a bit of a swerve now, if you're
Hmm.
okay with this, talking maybe a little bit more thematically. Um, Obviously, we are presenting this as part of the Sohome Horror Pride edition of the festival,
Hmm.
and I think you could say that the Piper doesn't necessarily have overtly queer themes to it, and certainly kind of from that, not as far as I'm aware, the original text also, surprisingly, considering there is a wealth of kind of queer readings into a lot of like the Grimm fairy tales and kind of like the early childhood texts and the cautionary tale kind of works. There isn't so much of that for certainly not as far as I could find for the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Was and then also kind of adjunct to that, you coming from someone who has written and directed quite explicitly queer work before, with both with Rift and with Midnight Kiss. So where do you feel that the Piper sits within that? I think if we start there.
Yeah, for me, it like kind of there's like two sides from my perspective. Like there's the kind of story thematic side, which I agree, it's like not, I wouldn't say it's explicitly queer, and like I wasn't, it wasn't like I was kind of trying to get away from that either. It's just for me, anytime I write anything, it's just I kind of just go with whatever comes here.
Mm,
And if there's like anything, most of the things that come to me are quite either very gay or very queer,
mhm,
and I go with that. But for this story, I kind of went in a different direction. But then on the other side, I feel like to me, there is kind of a flamboyance to the film. There's kind of like like a kind of I don't know how to even describe it, but there's like a little bit of a queer feeling just to the film itself, like the filmmaking itself.
Like a camp
Um,
theatricality, almost, just
a
like
little bit, yeah.
the
It's like
nature of it being on stage, or
yeah, exactly. And I wouldn't,
like opera.
maybe
Opera is
like opera.
a queer coded film in its way. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so yeah, there's like a theatricality to it, there's like a flamboyance to it. Um, so in that respect, I think there is, it's not, I wouldn't call it like 100% straight film, and I want to believe that like that kind of sensibility comes from, my my own personality or my own kind of lived experiences. Um, so I think no matter what kind of a film you do, there's always going to be some of you in the film, no matter what.
Hmm.
And I think in this case, it's less kind of it's less in the text and it's less in the subtext and it's more in the kind of just the vibe of the film, if
Yeah.
that makes any sense.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so if we were to like, retract a little bit for you as a filmmaker,
Hmm.
um, if we were to talk about Riff, because we've never had the opportunity to really do that.
Hmm.
So I mean, we met initially with regards to, I'm fairly sure Midnight Kiss was our first interaction. Correct me
Yeah,
if I'm
yeah, I
wrong.
think so. I think so. Yeah.
Which is me just going like,
Right.
"Hi, give me this film. You're my in with
Right.
this film." But if we
Yeah.
go all the way back to Rift as your debut, am I right in saying that, aren't I?
It's my second film. I made my first feature in New York a
Mhm.
couple of years earlier
Where you went to film
called
school?
Chi where I went to film school, yeah.
Okay.
Film called Child Eater,
Hmm.
which was based on a short that I had also made also called Child Eater. But yeah, Rift was like the second film. But it's yeah,
Which
you can call it my debut. It kind of is in a way. So
do you feel that I think that Rift is a really interesting one because as you say, it being like it's obviously a passion piece. It's made for a very very small amount of money. It was a shot with a very nuclear crew. It feels like a deeply personal film. Like it carries a tremendous amount of weight and pathos to it. Do you feel that that film is unique within your catalog of both directed and written works?
I mean, yes, I do feel like, at least out of the stuff that has kind of come out so far, it is quite unique because, like you say, it is very, the story, there's a lot of, personal stuff in that story. Also, just how that film was made was very kind of run and gun, very, guerrilla filmmaking style. Um, so it is very unique in that way. But I think, as the Piper came after that, and I mean, Midnight Kiss kind of, even though I didn't direct that, I wrote that, and that also has a lot of, it's more, that's a film that's more kind of flashy, but it also, there's a lot of kind of me and like topics that I'm interested in, especially at that time that I kind of threw into that
Yeah.
story.
I think
But
there's
I
a lot
do,
of stuff within that script in particular that with without anything from Carter, I think maybe isn't necessarily in the final product. Correctly, like feel no need to comment where you don't want to. But there is a lot more meat on the bones than is present within the runtime of the film, possibly due to the nature of the Into the Dark like anthology format. Um,
yeah, and I think that's fine to talk about. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of, my first draft. I mean, I love that movie, and I love,
Me too.
you know, love Carter, loved working with Carter, but that that whole process was like the most insane process that I've ever been through because it happened so fast. And like my first draft of that film was finished like literally like 3 weeks before we started shooting, and there was at least like three rewrites that happened in those 3 weeks before. So, and like I was saying earlier, like, you write a script and then you have all the realities of, what you can actually do within the time and with the budget that you have.
Mhm.
So always you have to kind of condense or take out or change, things. So that happened. on Midnight Kiss, and it happened maybe a little bit. Some things got taken out that I kind of wish hadn't been.
Mm.
But at the same time, like everybody, from me, from Carter to the whole Blumhouse team, like everybody was really kind of had their heart in that project, and everybody was very passionate about it. So it wasn't like it's not like I I don't even want to use the word blame, because I really do love what we ended up with.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to, I don't think there's anybody to kind of, I can't point a finger at anybody being like, oh, that's that person's fault that that thing didn't end up in the film. It's just that's how it
It's
turned
a
out.
big escalation
Yeah,
to go from Rift, which is a festival darling kind of film,
yeah,
to something that is then being put on cable television, presumably
right.
through Tubi or no Hulu. That
Hulu
was
in
it. Yeah.
America. Yeah,
Like that in itself, it's a big jump in audiences. And I think there's a lot of thematic ties between the two films that maybe is lost in its presentation, because like Midnight Kiss was very much advertised as a throwback party slasher film.
right,
Whereas there is a lot of more dark undertones to it, and there's a lot of kind of like a study of an internalized homophobia that's there, and the way
right.
that queer social groups interact in a way that could be like quite toxic on a social level. Um,
Yeah,
like there's a lot that's what I was getting to. There's a lot of like meat
yeah,
subjects that's in there that just isn't seen on a big disco ball like pup poster.
right.
So
It was very much inspired by my first year of living in LA.
right, okay.
Having interactions with a lot of the people you see in that film are are real real people. No,
And how long were you in LA for?
I was there for 2 years. I moved. I basically moved away because of COVID,
Mhm.
and I always thought I was going to go back, and then I didn't. And actually, I feel very good about that decision now. I mean, a lot of great things happened after I moved away from LA. Just as many things happened when I did move there. So,
Mhm.
yeah,
I mean, so in moving from LA, so you're back in Reykjavik, you're in Iceland now,
yeah, yeah.
which is hometown ish.
Yeah, yeah, that's where I'm born and raised. I mean, kind of in the suburbs of Reykjavik.
Mhm.
Yes.
And what is the film scene like there? Is there a fertile a like you can put it two ways: film production, film digestion? Is there either of those present?
Yeah, I think I mean there's definitely a very robust small but robust industry here. A lot of very talented people, a lot of very exciting filmmakers, both young and older. Yeah, there's a lot of cool things coming out here. Not as much genre as I would personally
Mhm.
like to see,
Mhm.
but nevertheless, very good stuff. And yeah, I think I read somewhere that the population of Iceland like goes more to the cinema than any other population, and maybe I don't want to say the whole of Europe, but I think at least in Scandinavia. But like we go
Nice.
to the movies quite a bit, so yeah,
Yeah, because I guess it's one of the excuse me. Some of the other Scandinavian countries have had a bit more of a boom certainly within the genre,
yeah,
but also within filmmaking as a whole. And I guess the whole like Scandi noir subgenre, which is tremendously wide-reaching.
you're
It's
right,
like saying the North American thriller genre
right.
in terms of like mileage covered. Do you feel that, and I mean, this might be a loaded and very, very wide question, but do you feel that there's a unique perspective within Icelandic filmmaking that is yet to be either captured on film or like raised to an international level?
Yeah, I probably yes. I mean, it's always hard to say, to it's hard to know what
Hmm.
when you're kind of inside of it. It's kind of hard to see what other people will kind of take away from what you have to say.
Yeah.
But I mean, I definitely think. I mean, just looking at the other, the non-genre, the more kind of art house drama films, which is kind of the bread and butter of what we make here.
Mhm.
Like I think a lot of those films are, have very unique voices, unique stories. So I don't see why that can't apply to the genre
Mm.
films as well. I just think because the industry is quite small here and there's just isn't enough people interested in making those kinds of movies. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a bunch that I'm not aware of, and they haven't had their opportunity to kind of make their films.
Mhm.
But I can count on half of one hand the kind of filmmakers in Iceland that are kind of intrigued, like interested in making horror films
Yeah.
or kind of the darker thriller films.
Do you think if you hadn't have moved to New York for film school, it would have been a lot more difficult for you to get that either that foot in the door or that opportunity for funding?
I felt that way at the time because I didn't really, I don't come from, a family of filmmakers or anything.
Mhm.
I didn't really have any connections. So at the time, I felt like, okay, I need to. I mean, I wanted to go to film school and I wanted to go to America, um, but I also kind of felt like I needed to have something in my back pocket to kind of prove to others that I could do what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if like today, I'm not sure if that's, if I was thinking, if the logic was sound. I'm still very happy that I went to film school and I think I learned a lot and I made a lot of great friends and collaborators and, you know, over
Mhm.
there. But I think having made Rift, which was such a kind of like, oh, I'm just going to go in the country and make a movie. And I
Was
feel
that
like
one
that was the
entirely
film.
independent? So there was no US based backers or international backers for that one. That was just I have a script,
Yeah,
I have a passion, let's fucking do it.
yeah, it was me
Mhm.
kind of getting all my friends to come and help me and emailing actors that I liked, being like, "Hey, I wrote a script. Do you wanna do you wanna come make a movie for no money?" And it worked out. But it was, it was very hard, but it paid off. So
Sorry, I was coughing. I muted myself. Would you want to go back to that model at all? Like, do you have scripts in the on the back burner that would be kind of inclined to be contained within your country or within that own budget range that is intrinsic to it?
Yeah, yeah, yes and no. I mean, I definitely have some ideas that would fit, like that I could make work with, in that situation. It is very like, I think it's one of those things that you can only do like, one, two, three times. I would say like two times before you burn out because it is very difficult. And even though I say it paid off career wise, it didn't pay off financially. Like I was broke for like a long time.
Yeah.
After even like with that film going to all those festivals, like I could barely afford to go to those festivals
Mhm.
to kind of follow the film through. So it wasn't easy. Today I'm like I wouldn't have done it any other way,
Mhm.
but to go back to it, I mean, sometimes I'm like, oh, it's so free. It would be so freeing to like not have to think about like, oh, are we gonna get that funding or is that person gonna say yes or all the kind of bullshit that comes with making a movie because it can be very tricky. So sometimes I kind of fantasize about like, okay, maybe one day I'll go back to making a film like Rift. Um, but yeah, maybe not super soon, but one day. I mean, but then I look at like, what Carter, for example, did when he
Mhm.
went and made Swallowed, which was, I think, a very similar situation where a very small group of people,
Mhm.
they went into, in the middle of nowhere and made that awesome movie. And I think for him, that'll, not just creatively paid off, but I think, that really kind of lifted his profile in
Mhm.
in certain sectors. And I think, yeah. So
It's finding
I
that
think
perfect balance, isn't it? It's the right script,
yeah,
the right people that you're going to work with, the right time, the right finances. It's just
yeah,
it's alchemy.
it's alchemy. It's always, and you never know. Sometimes, I'm always surprised by like what kind of where I hit a wall and where doors open, because it's usually not where I kind of think
Mhm.
things will happen.
Much like the Pied Piper of Hamelin, because two films came along at the exact same time. Like that.
Right, yeah.
Have
Yeah.
you seen the other the Piper?
I haven't seen it. I don't know if it's available. I mean, maybe now, but it was playing festivals, I think, last year.
Was
No, I haven't seen it. I remember when we heard about it,
Mhm.
because they were filming. I think they either had finished filming like a couple of months before we started filming, or like it was. I know that they did their film first, because when we found out about it, we kind of had a panic situation,
Yeah,
like, oh, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do?
yeah,
And then I think I found like a synopsis, and I was like, okay, it sounds like different enough. So it's like we're not, it's the same kind of backstory, but like kind of not doing it the same way.
yeah.
So
I think you could. So I have seen both of them. I think they could
okay,
be like quite complementary to each other because
okay,
they're very different. And in some ways, where we're talking about like the queerness in the filmmaking of you, your film, The Piper, there is almost a more camp theatricality within the Elizabeth Hurley film, but
okay,
it almost feels accidental.
right,
It's kind of like this really interesting intersect of intention versus accident, and that they are complementary films in the fact that they're taking the same subject matter, weaving a similar main character to it and similar themes of like of the mother and daughter relationship, of like hereditary guilt within there.
right.
That it's weird serendipity that they both happen to come along
Yeah,
within the same span of 24 36 months, whatever it was, and in terms of like conception and shooting. um yeah, I think it's something that we'll
yeah,
look back on in like 5 years, and maybe
right.
we can do like a filmmaker on filmmaker and be like, what was
Yeah,
happening
I
here?
mean,
Yeah,
I'm a huge fan of Anthony Waller's like Mute
yeah.
Witness. So like I'm very curious to see the film actually. So but I haven't, maybe I'll after this I'll go on iTunes and see if it's rentable. Although like right now I'm like kind of, when you finish a movie and once it's out, like you're kind of just like, okay, I don't
Yeah.
wanna see that thing for a few months now. Get it away from me.
Yeah.
But so maybe I'll watch it in the fall. We'll see.
Save that one for the day. Um,
Yeah.
do you have any, what did we say? Do you have any Icelandic, either LGBTQIA plus films or genre films or both of them together that you would recommend to our audience?
Good question. I mean, yes. So there's one amazing film. It's not a genre film. It's a heavy drama,
Hmm.
but it's very, very good. And it's called And Breathe Normally.
Hmm.
And it came out in 2017. It played at Sundance. It won a bunch of awards. So that's definitely it's a lesbian. I'm not gonna call it a love story because it certainly isn't. But there's a it's a dark lesbian romance
Hmm.
set in a very interesting situation. So that's a film that's fantastic. And then there's a film that I haven't seen yet, but I know the filmmaker and he's a great guy. And it just came out. It just premiered at Tribeca this year, and it's called The Damned.
Hmm.
And the director's name is Thoroddsen Jonsson, and
Hmm.
he's a very exciting,
Hmm.
Icelandic genre filmmaker. That it's a film that's shot in Iceland, but I think it's supposed to be set in somewhere in the UK. It's a UK cast at least.
I have it in my inbox.
You have it. Oh, great.
Literally
Yeah.
just pinged him. Yeah. Once this festival moves past, then it's like all steam ahead for the next one.
Yeah, yeah. I
We'll
haven't
be
seen it, but
working there.
he's a super cool guy and
Yeah.
very talented. And that's his feature debut.
Hmm.
So yeah, those are the two that I would recommend. Also, I'm like anytime I get a question like that, I totally blank out and every movie falls out of my brain. So I'll have like 10 more in as soon as we end the conversation, I'll remember all these other great films.
Well, I'm going to ask you for another recommendation, but I'm going to widen the spectrum at this point.
Okay.
Obviously, we're here platforming and celebrating the history, the present, and the future of queer horror. Is there a film in particular that you think either particularly inspired you as a filmmaker, specifically within that subgenre, or one that you think is underloved, one that you want to get more recommendation of?
Yes. So the two that kind of come to mind that I love a lot, and I actually just rewatched one of them not too long ago, and it holds up amazingly, are Knife Plus Heart and Stranger by the Lake.
Yeah.
Two very stylistically different films, both French.
But very horny, like both equally
Very,
horny. Really
very
fucking
horny.
films.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I mean, I know again, like I'm blanking out very badly, but I mean, I know there are films that are older than that I saw a longer time ago that I'm just not remembering. I mean, speaking of kind of being flamboyant and um, you know, the films of Brian De Palma, I think, are incredibly queer in a very weird way, because he's very not queer, and they're very problematic, those films.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like there's the style and the kind of the visuals and everything. Like I don't know, those were films that I was very obsessed with his movies. Still kind of am, but especially when I was a little younger. Argento at the same time, it's the same thing. Even I would say Argento is much more, if because I've kind of, with my boyfriend, I've been showing him kind of the old Argento movie. We're kind of going chronologically through his career.
Okay.
And especially in those early films, he always has, a queer character, and like, but always presented
not a monstrous
in a
queer, is it either?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's always presented in a very positive light and like weirdly kind of progressive. I mean, we say weirdly
a
for
non-focused
today.
light. Like they're not the butt of the joke. They are not a monstrous
Exactly.
film. They just are. Which is very it's inherently Euro. So
right. Exactly. So it's like, I think people today we're like, oh my God, that's so progressive for the times, but maybe maybe it wasn't, like, maybe we had it better, even though a lot of the laws and stuff weren't as good. I think maybe, I don't know, people, the world is a very strange place right now. So people's opinions are weird. But yeah. I don't want to say Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 because that's the movie everybody mentions, but for sure, that's one of them.
For a reason, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the 40th anniversary next year, so
yeah.
Like we'll be doing something for it, so
yeah. I mean, it's great fun.
Yeah.
So
you mentioned about and maybe you don't want to comment on this, and this is absolutely fine because it's maybe not something that I feel confident commenting on either. And in fact, you know what we'll do before we even do this? We'll stop recording and we can just continue this.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us. What we'll do last is how could everybody find you online, find your other work, specifically within the UK?
Yeah, good question.
I'll look that up. You do you. I'll do the film.
Yeah. Well, you can find me on I'm on Instagram. I'm like at Lingur, which is my name without the ER at the beginning, which is like my old nickname from when I was a kid. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter/X, even though I'm very inactive. So if you follow me expecting a lot of posts, you will be sadly disappointed. I kind of lurk and see what other people are saying, but I'm there. Yeah, if you like, I guess, like, maybe I'll just say, if you like the Piper or any of the films, if you leave us a nice review, spread the word. They're all kind of available somewhere, except the new one, Cold, it's still doing festivals, so it'll be out there sooner or later, but it's still just festival touring right now.
it's pulling numbers. Like I've just
Yeah.
checked on Letterboxd just to find out the availability of the other ones, and even people like I'm not exactly sure where they've seen them within the UK, but a couple of people that I follow, we've got some fours and some fives. We're doing good.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Very good.
but unfortunately that was not
I'm
available. The Piper,
no.
the Piper and not the Piper, Rift and Charlie Eater you can find on Amazon.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
right there. Erlingur, what do you have next? What have you got in the pipeline you can tease us with?
Well, I do have, I mean, it's there's a few things happening, all of them kind of early stages, mostly writing things. The one thing that I can't tease, even if yeah, it's very unofficial, but I am working on something that's not genre at all. It's more kind of, I guess, drama, but it's kind of it's looking at the queer history, the rights history of queer people in Iceland from the
Okay.
late 1960s into today, basically.
Mm,
So that's something that I'm super excited about.
mm,
But it's still, a little far away.
mm.
But hopefully there will be some news on something
Yeah.
in the near future.
That's important shit. That's good. When was legality reached within Iceland?
Well, we had our first what's the term in English? The legal marriage, like uh, there's a term like marriage on paper, like but not in a church.
Like a civil
Um,
partnership is what we call it within
civil
Iceland.
partnership,
Yeah.
civil partnership.
Hmm.
We had that in 1996. So I think we
That's
were
early.
the second after the Netherlands,
Hmm.
second country in the world after the Netherlands. But yeah, in the 2000s, like today, Iceland is like all the laws, all the language, everything's been changed. It's very, you know, queer friendly, in a really good way. And I think, without going into politics, I think one of the great things about Icelandic politicians is that everybody seems to be very on board with, queer people. We don't have like a party that's like
Right.
anti-queer people,
Oh, okay.
which is
It
refreshing when
really
you look
is.
at what's happening in other parts of the world. So
Yeah.
we've got a good thing going here.
Yeah. What's the work visas like there?
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds really, really intriguing. We look forward to catching more of that. And will you be hanging around throughout the festival? People can hopefully see you over the
Yeah,
next 3 days once
I'll
this one's
be,
up.
I'll be here and there. You'll
Okay.
find me lurking quietly in a corner somewhere with my popcorn.
Yeah. Love to see it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.